is the name of our show.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Large Glass. I'm Todd.
I'm Terri.
And the Large Glass is our Tuesday night stream where we bring you a new artist or art-related theme to talk about. We get to hang out with you guys in the chat. How you doing?
I am doing well. How are you doing?
I am all right, I guess.
Okay, good.
Not bad. I think we had a really good and busy week.
I think we did.
In that, we got to do a meetup.
We did.
So we got to meet up with two of our longtime chat participants and supporters, and there they are, John and
Hi,
Jess.
guys.
We're gonna call them John and Jess Park because we always go by screen names here.
Yes.
But yeah, and it was fantastic.
It was a lot of fun.
We got to meet two people from our chat. We had a good time. We love you guys. We had an awesome time. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
And we're looking forward to the next one. We got ideas for how to make this work.
I didn't want it to end. I felt like it ended very prematurely.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
next time.
There's Dave. How's it going, Dave?
Hey, Dave.
And Mom. Jess says likewise. So that's
Yes.
good.
Yeah,
that's
it was a good time.
So I think, first of all, you're a little off screen. You should come over to me a little
should
bit.
come over
yeah,
to
you
you
gotta.
a little
We got a
bit.
center. This
Okay.
is like pre-show stuff.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay.
Should we drink?
We should drink.
So tonight's artist is, where's tonight's artist from?
She's from Harlem.
Oh, so we've got a New York beer, not a Harlem beer,
That's okay.
but we've got a Brooklyn beer.
Yes.
Right? And so we have for you the 6 Point Brewery.
I will say when I first saw the label, it's called the Crisp, but the way he had it turned, I thought it said the Crisis, and I couldn't see the rest of it. Like, what kind of beer did you get tonight?
Hi, Pumpkin
So-
Audrey.
Hey.
And John Park says, right back at you. Good, good. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Crisis. Well,
The Crisis.
the Crisis would be a beer that I probably would drink.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, so the Crisis for you. Well, we're going to rename this the Crisis.
The Crisis.
Terri will be
Not
drinking.
that that's any reflection
This has
on
nothing to do with tonight's
tonight's
artist. Nothing.
No, I
nothing.
just thought that was funny.
And I am going to drink what is now going to become my go-to beer for any kind of assemblage, collage, because I love this beer from the wreckage, and I love the idea that tonight's artist is using reclaimed fabrics, reclaimed materials,
Reclaimed
artwork in her work. And so from the wreckage seems appropriate. And unlike you, I love a really nice, big, meaty chocolate stout.
Very hearty.
So good. It's like second dinner. Oh yeah.
That's not going to bubble over, is
What are you
it?
guys drinking tonight, everybody? What do we have? And let's hear it. We want to know. All right, so from the wreckage and 6 Point Crisis.
The Crisis.
So we're on episode 49. We're one away
We are.
from
We're
a
one
half
away.
a half century.
Yes.
Sort of.
Sort of.
Cheers. Cheers to you guys. Nice to
Cheers.
have you here tonight. Thanks. Oh my God, 63 is here.
Yay!
Hi, 63. You like their Bengali? Yeah, I like the Bengali too, actually. And the other one that they have, there is one they have called Resin, which is like knock you on your face. Yeah. Pumpkin Audrey's drinking Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah.
Mom's drinking iced coffee.
Yummy.
63, you were our featured supporter, was it 2 weeks ago?
I think it was last week.
67 was last week.
No, 67 was the week
63 was
before.
last week. 67 was the week before.
Yeah.
So I hope you've been having a very good summer. I'm sure you've been up to some good stuff. We should probably do our featured supporter for tonight, right? What do you think?
Yes, I think that's a good idea.
All right, so tonight's featured supporter is somebody that's not often in the chat, but it's Brian Carney. Brian Carney is a fantastic supporter of ours from the Hunterdon Art Museum, key person there, helped us out enormously with Hunterdon Art Tour, and we know that he's here, on occasion, as best he can be. So thanks, Brian Carney, for all your support. We love having you on. You're kind of on our team on some level when we are in that neck of the woods.
Truly.
So thanks,
Yep,
Brian.
So thanks.
All right, so let's see. Jess Park Aperol Spritz. Okay. Oh, damn, I wish I was there. Sorry, was on the Cape. Oh,
Oh.
well, we wish we were on the Cape.
Yeah, we wish we were there.
Yeah.
Oh.
All right, so we've got some news.
We do.
And I'm going to go through news. Now, we've got a fair bit of news tonight, actually, and, some pretty cool stuff. And the first thing that we want to talk about tonight is the fact that our very own Hamlet Dobbins has a show on right now at what I'd like to also say, our very own The Brownstone Art. So 2 entities that we've collaborated with have joined forces and put a show together, which I'm super excited about. So I must keep reminding myself of this, a show by Hamlet Dobbins at the Brownstone Art. So what we would love to have you guys do is visit thebrownstoneart.com and check out this show. It's a virtual show, so you can take your time moving through the space, looking at Hamlet's paintings. And on the 17th of August, which is 2 shows from now, episode 51, we're actually going to do a critique of the show, not as our whole show, but as a sort of entry point to that night's show. So we're excited about that.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled to have Hamlet at that show.
It's funny, when you said August 17th, I was thinking that's a while away, but it's not. We're already...
Just think, in 2 shows, we'll be more than halfway through August, and summer is done. It's so close to done.
So crazy.
And I mark summer's end by school starting.
Sure.
I mean, technically summer goes further than that, and the warm weather will certainly last longer, but it is what it is. So that's that. So check out Hamlet Dobbins at the Brownstone Art. It's a great show. You really should go and see that. We love Hamlet's work, and we love David and Josh over at the gallery. So, and Taylor. Sorry, Taylor, I didn't mean to leave you out of that one. Can you post the link? I can. I'll post the link in the chat 63 in just a minute for you. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh yeah, this guy. So we all know Jerry Saltz, and recently Jerry Saltz posted on his Instagram account a video that had Bill Murray in it, and Bill Murray was talking way back. This was a video from 2014 where one of the people interviewing him asked him about when was it that art actually became...
I thought he was
Glenn's here. He's like, oh God, no. As soon as he saw... Wait a minute. Let me do it again. Ready, Glenn? Say it again, Glenn. Oh God, no. So anyway, he posted this video from 2014 of Bill Murray talking at there was a press conference where Bill Murray was sort of being talked to about a movie that he had been featured in at that time. And somebody in the press asked him, when was it that you felt that art really became an important part of your life and when it meant something to you? And so I thought Bill Murray really had a beautiful response in this. And he actually winds up talking about this Jules Breton painting in a way that really fascinated me. So what I did was I went and grabbed that video for us to watch. It's just a couple of minutes, but I would love to show it to you. So let's just take a quick look at that. Hang on one second while I fire this up. Of course, we're gonna have to watch an ad. There we go.
Congratulations, first of all, on a fantastic film. I think obviously one of the questions that the film really does ask is what the world would be like without art and creativity in it. And I'm curious, this is a question for all of the panel, but perhaps starting with Bill, what you imagine your life would have been like had you not discovered art and creativity, and if there's a specific moment in your lives you can pinpoint where art really has mattered to you and made a difference for you.
Well, I think it would be back when I started acting in Chicago. I wasn't very good, and I remember my first experience on the stage. I was so bad I just walked out on the street and started walking. And I walked for a couple of hours, and I realized I'd walked the wrong direction. Not just the wrong direction in terms of where I live, but the wrong direction in terms of a desire to stay alive. And so this may be a little bit not completely true, but it's pretty true that I walked. I then thought, well, if I'm going to die where I am, I may as well just go over towards the lake, and maybe I'll float for a while after I'm dead. So I walked over towards the lake, and as I got there, I realized I'd hit Michigan Avenue. And I thought, well, Michigan Avenue, that runs north too. And so I started walking north, and I ended up in front of the Art Institute of Chicago. And I just walked inside, and I didn't feel like I had any place being there. And they used to ask you for a donation, you know, when you walk into a museum, and I just walked right through because I was ready to die and pretty much dead. And I walked in, and there's a painting there, and I don't even know who painted it, but I think it's called the Song of the Lark, and it's a woman working in a field, and there's a sunrise behind her. And I've always loved this painting, and I saw it that day, and I just thought, well, look, there's a girl who doesn't have a whole lot of prospects, but the sun's coming up anyway, and she's got another chance at it. So I think that gave me some sort of feeling that I too am a person and get another chance every day the sun comes up.
All right, so I liked that. I've been throwing in a lot of obituaries lately, so I wanted to kind of throw that in there. I mean, I love Bill Murray, so
That's such a happy.
it's good.
Happy thing.
It's good.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I love hearing that from him.
Inspirational.
And so that's a great little bit. And then I have one last thing to talk about in terms of the news, and that is this really interesting collaboration started by Rick and Laura Brown of Hans House Studio. And what they're doing is they're going to be hosting this, it's a teaching project, and it's centered on craft. And what they're going to do is they're going to take 30 people, and they're actually going to reconstruct a full-scale, 3-story high truss from Notre Dame Cathedral in the original materials, with the original architecture in place. Now, they're going to be actually they've gone and sourced trees that are appropriate in terms of their size and age to actually do this project. Now, remember, this is just one truss, not obviously the entire roof. But it is really intended through architecture to sort of teach and resurrect an old school kind of craft, right? And hopefully through that resurrection of that craft, they're going to sort of try and maybe find something out that, I should say, not find something out, but what I should say is sort of relearn something that has been lost, number one. And number two, once this is done, it will sit, it's being done in Washington, D.C., it will sit in D.C. for a little while, and then it's kind of functioning in some way as a gift to France in this kind of collective effort to rebuild that cathedral. And I just love that. I absolutely love that. And so Rick and Laura Brown, my hat's off to you guys. I think this is a really, really interesting project, and I just feel really good about that. So I'm curious to see how that goes.
Wow, this is like a really optimistic news.
This is my
store segment this
You know,
week.
I had my St. John's wort and my
Yeah.
CBD oil, and I'm
there
like,
you
all
go.
right, everything's okay.
Everything feels great.
All right.
Okay.
So, that's enough of that.
Yeah.
We don't have that many birthdays this week.
No, we don't. We don't.
But we should probably get down to
We can
business.
get
'cause
down
by
to
not that many
business.
birthdays, we mean we
Yeah.
had 5.
Yeah, but
We omitted 1.
we
I'll
did,
talk
and
about
Todd's
that.
going to talk about that one. So Louis Armstrong, his birthday is August 4th, 1901. You know him as the trumpeter, vocalist. He sang lots of big hits. It's a Wonderful Life. Him bebopping along in some cases.
Can I do it?
Todd does an impression
Well, hold on.
that he was kind of jonesing to do.
No,
Because, you know, it's
I'm
his
not jonesing to do my
birthday, and-
impression, but there's a story behind it. And you know how when we think of Louis Armstrong, we think of What a Wonderful World. We think of this, you know, this sort of icon of jazz, this American icon of music.
I think we might have talked about this.
We did on an earlier
before.
show, but no one here, maybe my mom, remembers it, and she's going to
Yeah.
be mad at me for doing this again. But
Yeah.
so Terry and I were driving in the car, like, I don't know, 3 years ago.
It's Christmas time.
2 or 3 years ago, Louis Armstrong's on, and there is this song called A Fine Romance.
Yes.
And we're listening. We'd never heard this
We're
one before, and it
listening
just happened to come on in a mix, and we're listening to
Yeah.
it. And
Nice.
there's the lyrics go like this. It's like a fine romance with no glitches. A fine romance with no bitches. And we both kind of I almost slammed on the brakes. We looked at each other and we were like, did he just say bitches? And so from then on, we can't help it. We'll be washing dishes. We'll be like, a fine romance with no bitches. It's just like, it's the most ridiculous thing. But it's like
your whole world crashes when someone that wholesome sings like that. But
one of the reasons Terri wanted him here was because
he's also a two-dimensional artist. When we went down to New Orleans, at the Jazz Museum there, they actually had an exhibit of his that was up and running. One thing he did was he loved to collect news stories about himself, almost like a scrapbook. And he also had a ton of reel-to-reel collages. And what he would do is he would collage on the reel-to-reel
boxes.
Yeah. And the museum had, I don't know, 50 of them.
Oh my God, it was a fantastic show.
It was fantastic, and you could see the thought processes, and they were scotch taped, and he was fixated on certain things like his bowels. Like he kept putting in the laxatives and stuff like that. And dietary stuff. But he also had all these other images of him with celebrities and him playing somewhere. So it was really cool to see.
Yeah, I liked that show a lot, actually. And I think showing that here is much more appropriate than maybe bringing up a performance or something. But we got to keep on moving here.
We have to keep on moving.
All right.
So this is Tom Thompson, August 5th, 1877. I have to say, I didn't really know that much about him. But when I started looking into him, they're amazing. He only lived to about 39 years old, but there's over 400 pieces by him collectively.
So prolific.
He was a Canadian artist, self-taught. He mostly did landscapes, so a lot of oil sketches.
Yeah.
So
beautiful work.
Yeah, it was really nice coming across him. This is why I like to do the birthdays.
I was just going to say,
we stumble across people we normally don't
never
encounter.
had seen before. Yeah,
so,
for sure. All right, happy birthday, Tom.
Happy birthday.
Oh, this dude.
Andy Warhol.
I gotta say, I didn't even put in any paintings of Andy Warhol's because we all know them.
I actually didn't research much other than the year of his birth.
Yeah.
You know, so he was born on August 6th, 1928. We know him. He's an American icon, pop art. There he is with Basquiat.
Yeah.
So.
Happy birthday, Andy.
Happy birthday, Andy.
We should not shortchange Andy Warhol, of course.
Him, but we all know who.
But it's like I would rather put up pictures of Andy Warhol, than his artwork, just because I like the personality. I mean, I like the work too.
Yeah.
Right. But and then of course another artist that we featured on our show.
Yes, this is Yinka Shonobare.
Right.
We featured him back on episode 18.
That was 18?
18.
Oh my God.
He was born on August 9th, 1962. He's a British-Nigerian artist, Yinka Shonobare CBE. If you can recall, he had that distinction behind his name. Dealt with a lot of issues of post-colonialism and racial injustices and such like that. And he excelled in using this batik fabric that was a hallmark of his artwork.
Yeah, yeah. We did omit an artist this week from the birthday list, and it's kind of one of the ways we have several ways in which we sort of glean birthdays from the internet world, and we populate a spreadsheet, and then we go through there and we build this whole thing for our show. And Emil Nolde, German artist, was on that list. And so, bam, I threw him in there. I've known his work for years. Well, it turns out, and I didn't follow this news story, Emil Nolde was a member of the Nazi Party.
Yes.
And so, who am I thinking of? German Chancellor, help. Angela Merkel.
Okay.
My brain just froze.
I don't know what he was getting at.
Thanks, from the wreckage.
Here.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel, actually, when he had a show up, she had a couple of his paintings in her office, and this started to surface as they started to there was a new director of the Emil Nolde Foundation who opened up a bunch of documents that were sort of sealed and never allowed out to the public. And it turned out he had all these letters that thanks, Pumpkin Audrey. I was really stumbling over that one. I appreciate it. If you need to know anything about history, any president, Pumpkin Audrey is your absolute go-to. She will fill in the blank. Thank you. Anyway, Angela Merkel decided that she didn't want the paintings in her office anymore after all this came about. And frankly, I'm talking way too much and giving this too much credence, but we struck him from the list.
We did.
I'm sorry, you can't be a Nazi and be on our show.
Well, you know, it's tricky because we've actually come across artists that we wanted to do for the show, and
then we
something
find things
came
out.
up in their belief system that we thought.
We just, I don't know. I
can't
just
really-
don't want to. I just don't want to go down that road.
Yeah.
John Park says, I just happened to watch some sort of review of 1962 on YouTube, and they mentioned that was soup cans at the gallery in Los Angeles. There's a little fact. Wait a minute. Andy Warhol showed the Campbell's soup cans at a gallery in Los Angeles. He showed the actual soup cans.
Wow.
Huh.
Huh?
I think that's
There's
what
a
you're
little
saying. I don't know if you're
fact
talking
for
about the
you.
prints of the soup cans at a gallery in Los Angeles, or there's a little fact for you for the birthday. Well, that's good. And Ben Hagenbusch is here. That's good
Hey.
too. So anyway, that.
That's the birthdays. He said no.
Oh,
to
no,
work.
the work. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay. That was the year. Oh, okay. So 62 was the year that he showed it.
I think I came across something similar to that recently too. I also came across things on Valerie Slanis, the one who tried to assassinate him, and
Oh
stuff.
God.
But yeah, that was awful.
That could be an interesting topic for a show.
That could be an interesting.
Right, if we go into
topic.
the whole shooting of Andy Warhol,
Yeah.
that's kind of a crazy thing.
It really was.
All right, so we always talk a little bit about support, and we would like it for people to support our show. We always think that there's different ways to support our show, and I'm looking at all these buttons here, and I'm like, oh my gosh, no, that's not it. It says, please support our show. And then we go to here, the giveaway, and we have the Susan Stillman painting that, of course, we're working our way towards. We know that it's slow. We know that it's summertime. We know that people are still away. 63 was on the Cape. I know that, let's see, Sculptores in Italy. Mike Rader's upstate.
vacation.
Everyone's away.
Everyone's away.
And good for them for being away. We're not away. We should do something about that. Anyway, you can support our show in a variety of ways. One of those ways is word of mouth and getting people to follow. And when we get to 200 followers, we give away the Susan Stillman painting. Now, you guys have been hearing that every week, and you're probably like, oh my God, they're still going on and on about this. And then he's going to turn this one off. He's going to turn that slide off, and then he's going to turn on the Patreon slide. But I have got Patreon news for you. Patreon, we should go somewhere. I know. It's hard. I've got some Patreon news for all of you. If you've been on the fence about supporting via Patreon, here's an incentive. We always talk about how we do exclusive content for our Patreon supporters, and 3 to 4 times a year, we are going to be doing an exclusive and inclusive video broadcast with our Patreon community. Now, we have scheduled that. So on Friday night, September 3rd at 8 p.m., we will be doing an exclusive Patreon video for our patrons where we are going to have, number one, a guest speaker. So Glenn Lavertu, who is also I Hate Username 67, and a professor at a number of different colleges and universities up and down the East Coast. He is going to be joining us for a discussion on what, if anything, makes art bad? What makes bad art? So we're going to have a roundtable discussion. Now, here's the beauty of that, is the patrons will all be in a Zoom meeting with us. So this is not going to be a chat room environment. This is actually going to be, we're all on the screen, like the Brady Bunch, talking about this very topic. And I think it's actually going to be interesting. We're going to be showing some images. We're going to be inviting patrons to send us images of what they consider to be bad art. And maybe they have no examples of what they think is bad art. But I think it's going to be a lively and energetic discussion. So if you would like to get in on that action, you can support us via Patreon. Link is on the screen and you can jump over there. Wait, I thought it was badass art.
We could do that too. That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah, followed
There's
by
some
a November.
badass art out there.
Yeah, badass. Wait,
badass.
okay, wait a minute. What would be an example of badass art? I would say badass art would be anything
well,
by...
that's like art that kills. You know, we had talked about doing a show on...
No, I think badass has got like... is Richard Serra badass art?
He's pretty badass.
Well, he thinks he's badass.
Yeah.
I don't know. Come on, Glenn.
Actually, that would
Who's
be a good topic. Who's
a badass
art?
artist? All right. So anyway, that's where we're at. And if you'd like to join in, we would love to have you. And Patreon is no different in its, actually it's quite different, but in terms of the tiers of subscription, it's no different than a sub on Twitch, right? Except you get these other things. With Twitch and you subscribe, we love that. We love support on any level. But anyway, for what it's worth. Okay. Moving on. Andre Serrano. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll go with that.
Well, I was even thinking of some of the carousing and womanizing, but then that's probably badass artists, right? Like real.
Well, I guess the badass
Bellies.
artist versus the badass.
Caravaggio, like he's badass. He killed somebody, right? So that's pretty badass.
The parameters for being badass is you have to commit murder, apparently.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm like fixated on this theme. I'm moving on. I'm moving on.
You moving on?
Yes.
You ready?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I'm ready.
All right. So tonight's artist, which we really need to get to.
Yes.
Would you like to introduce her, or do you
I
want
would
me?
love to introduce her.
All right. Let's get down to business.
And I have to admit, I have been practicing the pronunciation of her name.
We both have.
Yes.
We both have, because I don't know if anyone remembers the night that we had to do the birthday of Eve Tanguy.
Oh, that's a classic.
And we kind of, Terry and I had a back and
Butchered
forth
it.
about, well, I mean, we've always talked about mispronunciation of names.
Yes.
And we really work hard to make sure that those are right. And
We do.
we've had some glitches.
Yeah.
We've had some glitches before in the past.
Yeah.
But tonight,
We have Tschabalala Self.
Tschabalala Self.
Yes.
And this is another one that we kind of stumbled upon
Yes.
in the best way.
Yes.
And I'm in love.
Yeah.
So
I actually stumbled across her on Instagram. I was looking up.
that's not the first image I wanted to show.
Ooh.
That is not it.
But that's okay. And this is interesting too, because when you look at, she's very young. She's a young, rising artist. She was born in 1990 in Harlem. Very young.
I feel old.
Yeah, I keep saying she's super young. In 2012, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background history. 2012, she graduated with her BFA from Bard. And shortly thereafter, she earned her MFA from the Yale School of Art, Painting and Printmaking. She has shown nationally and internationally. She has several shows going on right now that are a big deal. One's in Baltimore that you could go see. She primarily focuses on depictions of Black females, and we will get into that in just a little bit. But interesting life. She was the youngest of 5 children.
Mm-hmm.
She was raised in a house that really prized culture and artwork. Her mother was very much into it. So from a young age, she was exposed to Faith Ringgold and many other artists as well. Her mom was a seamstress, and she actually taught classes at a technical school. And so from a very young age, she began to sew. Her mother would actually reclaim fabrics and create new garments for her children. So Tschabalala had a lot of background watching her mom do this as a seamstress. In fact, she works with her mom's sewing machine these days to make her compositions. She watched her sisters since she was the youngest one. She had 3 sisters and 1 brother. She remembers watching them get ready for dates and to go out and all of that, and just the female body and representations of that. So much to talk about. We've kind of assembled this show in an assemblage fashion. We pulled pieces here and there. Usually when you find information about her on the web, she's got a fantastic Instagram.
However, because we were talking about this.
Yeah, we were talking about this.
So when we go to put a show together, oftentimes we'll hit the artist's website, we'll hit the artist's Instagram, then we'll go out there and see if there were any videos made about the artist. Then we'll kind of go and look up any obscure articles we may be able to find. Sometimes we've actually contacted the artists and actually talked to them about their work before the show. All kinds of different ways in which we can acquire information about the work so that we can have an effective, show for you. And with Tschabalala's work, we wound up having a very hard time doing that. There's a lot of work available on the internet.
There is.
But details of that work, sizes, dates, things of that nature, they're hard to sort of piece together. And that was kind of a pun that was not intended. But that's one of the reasons why when we put this show together on her work, we felt like we were doing it in a similar collage-like fashion. It's like, well, let's take this piece and put it here and this piece and put it here. And we'll just see how this all flows in creating a dialogue for you and I to have, and hopefully for everybody in the chat room to kind of participate in. So, you know, I like to say collage more than assemblage because I feel like a lot of this remains two-dimensional, although I'm going to point out some parts that I think
She does have some sculptures
and
as
she
well.
definitely
she
has
definitely has sculptures.
and I'm gonna and I think that, you know, the relationship between the sculptures and the paintings is actually quite interesting once we start to get down to that as well. So let's take a look at let's just bring an initial piece in here and kind of get talking about this, because when I start talking about collage, right, and I start thinking about process, I love this idea that what you bring to the table, rather than a brush or a pencil or a material that's going to get directly manipulated, you bring the visual information to this blank canvas, this blank surface, right? And it is a visual sort of, I don't want to, the word game is just too simplistic because that seems to trivialize what is happening. But you're making aesthetic decisions based on, well, what about this here? And what about this here? And what about this here? And then you're able to actually pick them up and move them around and make these other choices, right? And I know this sounds like a very simplistic way of sort of describing what collage actually is, but there's something about that in the act that, and the decision-making element of this that is very freeing, right? It takes away this other kind of mark-making commitment that otherwise, it's a very different function. And that's very interesting for me. Pumpkin Audrey says, are these fabric? And the answer is
yes.
Yeah, they are. You want to talk a little bit more about her process?
She uses a couple different processes. Sometimes she will begin by drawing on the canvas and then finding pieces to kind of fit. She seems very flexible with what she has on hand. The fabrics that she uses are usually reclaimed. She likes to keep them and keep reusing them and reusing them, so you're going to see some similar fabrics from piece to piece. She also has a background in printmaking and painting, and she does think about working with fabrics as painting. She doesn't really
She calls herself a painter.
She calls herself a painter.
Yeah, which I really quite appreciate, actually, because, you know, one of the primary elements of painting, like, or I should say, one of the primary elements of two-dimensional design, which is a fundamental sort of approach to all things 2D, is shape. And these elements of the collage are really dealing directly with shape, and not just the two-dimensional shape that the piece of fabric encompasses, but the shape of the body that she's trying to sort of either talk about in terms of content or talk about in terms of form. So I find that to be also kind of interesting in how this relates to painting, but without necessarily a direct usage of paint.
I feel like there's a lot of directions to talk with her because she has a lot of concepts going on in her artwork. I do remember one interview, she had mentioned that in piecing together these pieces, when you think of the human body, there's many pieces that are involved. So when she's piecing together fabrics, there's some kind of, I don't want to say disconnectedness, but she can work on them almost as like these individual pieces, but then they function together as a greater part, like the greater body. So that was one way in which she was looking at her fabrics and working with that.
Yeah, and Ben's sort of mentioning, you know, the elements of fabric and how there's a whole new dimension here because of that. And he's right in a really, in a way that I think collage also has a very different tactility and visual aesthetic than painting does, in that what you're placing down sits on top of that surface, right? And so there's a very sort of stark contrast between figure and ground, unless you incorporate something that helps to either mitigate that starkness or create some kind of entry point or blend. And what I love about what she does is this kind of black shadow element as well. So on this one, it's a little bit hard to see, but there are 5 hands on here, and one of those hands is directly over the body. And that hand actually almost looks quilted. It's got a dimensionality to it that sticks up. Might be hard to see in this image, whereas the other ones are much more sort of flat and behind. And so they almost function like shadow, right? They almost function like backspace. And because the body itself is layered on top of that, there's this real interesting flat but dimensional thing going on in here. And I think that's really quite interesting for me. So for what it's worth, should we go to the next one?
Yeah.
All right. So this one's actually hard to see for you guys because it's so vertical and our screen is not. So what I'm going to do is let it sit here for a minute and then I'll zoom in on it. But do you want to talk about this a little bit?
I do. So when we look at Tschabalala's work, one thing she is known for doing, she primarily deals with issues regarding Black female bodies, how they've been objectified, sexualized. She grew up in the 90s and 2000s. Some of her influences in creating her art were actually the almost antagonists to what she's doing. Like she mentions Tupac Shakur's video, I think it's I Get Around or something like that, in which you see him singing and talking about being a player, and then there's all these beautiful Black women bouncing around in bikinis, and it seems that she's making a commentary in relation to some of these images of women. Now this painting right here, this piece, it's a multimedia, mixed media piece. I'm going to butcher the name, but it's called La Tsarchi. It was created in 2015. It was about Sarah Bartman. Now Sarah Bartman was a woman who lived a long time ago, I believe like the 1700s.
Late 17 to 1800s, yeah.
And she was South African, and she was married. Her husband was murdered, and I believe she was taken into slavery. One of the reasons why she became well known was that she had body proportion
that was different
different than most other people. So she almost became this.
Well, not most other people, different from what an American sort of perspective at that time, from a slave owner's point of view, was used to seeing. So they classified that as this kind of freakish thing.
She actually went on tour because she had been sold.
Well, they forced her on tour.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, she had been enslaved.
Right.
And then they went ahead and she was purchased and then put into a freak show.
Right.
Went on tour. She was abused. I mean, they sold her body. And even after she died, they kept her body.
They preserved her body and continued this tour.
It's really horrible. The story is just terrible.
However...
Right. And Sarah Bartman was known as the Hottentot Venus, and she basically toured as a curiosity. So this piece right here was an ode to her in which Tschabalala tried to reclaim her and give her an identity and make her beautiful. I'm
just going to try and scroll a little bit through some of the ways in which the fabric and, you know, there's a real sort of patina to the fabric that suggests a kind of natural age. I love the way some of the modulation and the ways in which the fabric sort of suggests the time, right, that has passed. Yet there are little hints of beautifulness in this. Overall I find it to be a very beautiful image, but then, you know, in and amongst the sort of aged, sort of modeled colors and textures. You've got a piece of the bright pink there. I love the way she uses the sewing machine as a drawing tool.
I do love that, and you see that over and over again.
Yeah.
She does these fantastic sketches and drawings with thread.
Right. And these lines that, in a lot of cases, the sewing is clearly a function, right? It's functional. But in here, the way in which that line sort of courses in and around each shape, sometimes more than once, suggests that kind of delicate hand as something is sketched out, that kind of close care one might take in sort of expressing a shape or thinking about a form. And I really love that here in the way these sort of overlap and layer and form. Really quite beautiful. John Park says, I read the arms as motion, almost like stop motion, just like the legs are in mid-jump. And he's talking about this earlier piece here. I like that comment.
Yeah,
I think that's
I
actually
could see
really
that.
quite good. There's a few pieces later on in the show that we'll show you that kind of suggest shadow. And I might have been sort of jumping the gun on my thought process there, but I like that read better here. So anyway, back to Love for Sarchi or Love
for Sarchi.
Love for Sarchi.
Yes.
But look at how careful and delicate. I mean, when you get in close on these, they're really paintings, right? It's almost as if the paint was applied elsewhere. In this case, the fabric shape, and then brought to the surface. But look at the line work in that calf, in the black calf here, and the way that sort of stitching is. Number one, it's not too careful, right? It's not. This is not about the high.
Precious or anything.
It's not. Yeah, it's not about the high craft of sewing, right? But there's also and then there's just these like little delicate moments like that blue on the toenails. It's really quite gorgeous, right? So you can tell in her sort of tribute to her that there's a kind of love in this,
Yeah,
right?
there's a couple comments there. 63 says almost like a Klimt in a way.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear, because I actually thought about Klimt as well, and that doesn't necessarily make someone's comment awesome because it was the same as mine, but you're totally right. And I think it has to do with the way that figure sits in that sort of modulated ground. It's a little bit ethereal.
Well, I think in the use of gold and iconography a little bit, that's what I get from it.
Yeah. Pumpkin Audrey says the hands are saying stop, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if you're saying the hands from the previous one or if you're talking about this one. Ben says, how did they get that background so nicely blended? Well, that might have just been an inherent quality in the fabric she was using. So that's, I can't quite answer that in detail. I'm not sure. But it definitely has this kind of, there's a spatiality to it, right? So, all right, let's keep moving on here. We got a bunch. Let me zoom in on this one for a second.
I think this one's one of her smaller pieces. She does do, so typically her pieces are life size or larger than life. When you stumble across them, the sheer scale is enough to blow your mind. But then she does like smaller pieces, and by smaller, they're still pretty big. But this one's a beautiful collaged face of a person.
Well, and what I like about this is, there are regions of fabric use now that begin to sort of, one thing, there was an article in the Time, I think it was the Times. I'm trying to remember where that article was. Let me see if I can pull it up really quickly. This was an article in Christie's, actually. And it says that she's been called, Tschabalala's been called the anti-Picasso, right? And I'm still curious about why exactly that is, because honestly, they say that in this article, and then they don't detail why.
I had seen the same thing, and I was almost wondering, because he went through that pink period and that objectification of women, and she seems to be reclaiming some of these
that's a good point.
female bodies that have been over-sexualized. So I almost feel like it's like that. When you look at Tschabalala's history, too, she's compared to a lot of different artists. She's
sure.
She's compared to, one thing I keep seeing is, like, I see an ode to Benny Andrews sometimes, how he worked the fabrics
totally.
in his pants and
Yes.
collages.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
sometimes you actually see, like, the denim or the jeans or something like
Yeah.
that. She's been compared to Matisse, especially when she does this Two Women
course.
series, and you see the shadows, and
Of course.
so yeah,
Well,
a lot of influence.
And I feel like, you know, the Picasso reference, the anti-Picasso, and the reclaiming of that kind of objectification of women, that makes total sense to me. But then when I see a portrait like this, I can't help but also think about the Cubist aspect, and not that this is entirely Cubist, but its inherent flatness, its inherent attention to shape, and elements of shape, this sort of fragmented collection of shapes that sort of neither define or obliterate the shape of the head, right? That to me somehow has something in Cubism, but you know, for what it's worth. I mean, I'm just trying to think out loud about this. Lots of thought, but mouth is closed. Oh. Yeah, you know, that's a really great point, Audrey. I love that. Look at that. It's like everything above the mouth line has this really complicated kind of colorful detail, action, rhythm. And then you get down here and it's sort of like almost masked, right? It's almost closed. It's a really great point. I love that. Oh, you were talking, okay, and Audrey says previous, meaning her comment about the hand saying stop was in the previous image. All right, let's keep rolling. This is another good one. And again, like we said, we've tried to find titles and dimensions on some of these, and it's just kind of been unavailable. And so I've always been one that likes to really just let the work speak for itself. So, you know, here we are. So I'm gonna cruise through these. Oh my God, it's 8:47 already?
Oh my gosh.
Come on.
This is another pretty one.
I love this piece.
This one's gorgeous.
There's certain pieces that she's done that have this kind of pattern element to the ground. Oh, it's way zoomed out. Hold on a minute. Let's bring that in a little bit closer. Let's get it full scale first. This patterned element to the ground, and then the sort of patterned element to some of the fabrics that sit on top, to me is just like dynamite. I love those folded and sewn striped pants down in the lower leg region of the leftmost figure on top of that other patterned background. There's just something really electric about the relationship between those two spaces. It's almost like you never want to put on stripes and polka dots at the same time because you just don't want to be this, like, you know, because there's too much energy there, right?
Yeah.
But then there's this little spot of energy down there in the legs that almost makes me feel like this is a dance. You know, I love that about this piece. So let's zoom in on this one just a bit so we can kind of see what's going on, because, you know, we've really got, it's going to be a little bit pixelated as I get in too deep.
Yeah, now I have a title for this one. It's called Spare Moment.
Spare Moment? Really?
Yeah.
Now that throws a different light on it a little bit, but I do love it.
I love her hand gestures too. Like, look, you can see a little bit more detail.
Yeah.
When she's sewing, so her mother passed away and she inherited her mom's sewing machine. So a lot of her creations are made with her mom's sewing machine. And the tie to history there was very intriguing to me as well, because she's continuing the tradition of her mother, and she's trying to pass on a new message.
Sure, and you know, her own heritage, of course, is certainly a huge part of this. And so using her mother's sewing machine just seems to be, you know, a perfect little, you know, sort of gemstone in the whole makeup.
Do you think we can watch a video on her?
Do you want to watch a video?
Yeah,
We have an awesome video.
So there's a lot of awesome little videos on Tschabalala, which is so cool. So we have a couple tonight.
I'm actually,
We'll give you a little glimpse.
I don't
into
know
her.
if I formally set that up, so you guys will just have to bear with me for a second because I have to see if I did it correctly. Please hold.
Please hold.
This is the part where I bring in the funky music. Let's see. I think it's this one. And I think it's just a little bit wonky in the way it sits on the screen. So let's see if I can make it the right size. Ah, the magic of
Yeah.
television.
So this is fairly recent too. All of her shows, she's been practicing since 2015, since she graduated from Yale. So most of the shows that you're going to see online, they're new. She's got a lot of fresh new stuff going on.
All right, let me pull this one up. Here we go. Let's watch this one. Ben says, position of the hands are so graceful. 63 says, no stripes and polka dots. Clearly, you're not a golfer, as the dude would say. I'm glad I stopped for a moment to include that. Her colors are amazing. They are. Some of these fabrics are just gorgeous. And I'm curious about the painterly aspect of this, which I believe she actually did in that previous slide. Let's take a look at this video. I think you're going to like it.
I've been in the studio since 2015.
Hold on one second, you guys. I just realized I don't have the screen perfectly sized for this, so bear with me. You're missing a good chunk of the video. I don't want to do that to you. There we go. Back to normal.
I moved into the space after graduating from Yale School of Art. I'm here pretty much all the time. The supplies that I have here are all the different artifacts of my practice. I keep all these materials, and this is really like my palette. Old pieces of packing material, an old headscarf. It's really just all the different kind of textiles that come into my life or into my studio. A lot of the works are made from works that were previously made, works that are reworked. It really allows for each work to be connected in its odd way, because one material that was used in a previous work can be used years in the future. Even if I buy a yard of fabric, it literally takes me years to use all of it, because I'm only really using scraps and bits and pieces of the material. I describe it as being collage. I describe it as being assemblage, mainly because I'm using objects that are of the world. And with them being of the world, a lot of the characteristics of the material is retained. People have associations with those textures, with the colors, maybe in their own personal lives. And I think they bring some of that sentimentality to the works when they're in front of them. This is one of the new works that I'm making for the ICA Boston show. I wanted to describe this domestic space through using kind of objects that I think people kind of really associate with a home. So a lamp, the end table, even here, which it's been drawn, but it hasn't been stitched yet, like the chandelier. The stitch has two functions. It has a utilitarian function of allowing all the disparate aspects of the paintings to be held together. But I'm also able to draw with the sewing machine and like further articulate the figure spaces and just other kind of like different details in the works. The figures in my works, I think about them sometimes as characters, sometimes as subjects. They're all imagined people and imagined scenarios. And sometimes too, the figures are less characters and less subjects and more like avatars or icons. They are meant to kind of hold and retain overarching ideas about a particular kind of lived experience. A work that I would consider to be more of like an avatar would be a painting like Pant. Her third leg is meant to be kind of a phantom appendage, which speaks more to part of her personality rather than like a realistic dimension of her physical form. So she's not built in any kind of logical way. I think that she's more meant to embody this kind of feminine machismo. As a storyteller, I want to develop like round figures. Some works speak to the unconscious elements of my subjects, and some speak to like their like tangible reality. Right now, I'm starting to work more simultaneously on my sculptural practice, thinking about ways in which those works can be installed in spaces with the paintings and create kind of different and alternative narratives than I've done in the past. So even though this figure's in the round, I still feel like this very much connected to the paintings, because in kind of making it, I used plaster gauze, which is another kind of form of textile. So they have a lot of the kind of patchwork aesthetic that's also in the painting. Some works start from sketches and some works just come from me building slowly, allowing for the materials just to build on one another, and then imagining back into those objects like how they could function as part of the form or part of the figure. It's just me kind of reworking those materials to create like new images and new narratives.
that she had drawn with the sewing machine was just incredible.
It really was.
So gorgeous.
I think the reason why I really liked that video is that we could see her process and see how she pulls it all together. So that was really cool.
Yeah. I've got another one here, but let's go back to the work just for a couple of minutes. I want to kind of just see a few more pieces of hers, and if we have time, we'll pop over to that other video. Can we talk about the bodega show?
Yes.
I think this is actually something that's really interesting.
I love the bodega show. This was called Bodega Run. It was in 2019. It was Hammer Projects in LA, and it was mostly about the neighborhood convenience store. This is what the show looked like on the street. You could just walk in. It was depicted much like your neighborhood bodega. She loved the concept of everybody could relate to a bodega, even though it has a name that's derived from Hispanic roots and such. You see like a microcosm of different cultures all coming together and at odd hours of the day or night looking for different things.
Yeah, and the culture of her neighborhood and her world where she grew up was hugely important in her development, as it is with most of us, but certainly in terms of her artistic development as well, aesthetically speaking. There's so much going on. I love a bodega.
I do too.
It's just from the, especially, and here's the thing about the bodega that I think is well done in this, right? In this piece, it could have just been about the art and, about art that, I should say, you've got some two-dimensional paintings on the wall, you've got a sculpture, 2 or 3 or 5 in the room, but instead we decide to treat the floor, we decide to treat the walls, we've got the neon in the windows.
We have a lot of elements. She tried to make a very immersive experience.
Yeah, completely, and it becomes the actual bodega.
It becomes the actual bodega. She's even got that mirror on the ceiling, which they were trying to catch shoplifters and see around the corner, and then that milk crate, the classic milk crate that you see. The walls were actually a wallpaper created from her line drawings, which created the shelves. And then she has the paintings on the wall that were larger than life, typical of maybe people you'd encounter or characters you would encounter in the bodega.
Right. And so you get in there, and what do you got? Well, you got these kind of these beautiful, I want to call them punctuation marks in this sea of this other kind of background imagery, right? So the line drawings sort of fade into the distance and become that kind of cacophony of information, this cacophony of imagery in a bodega where, there's just so many products that every square inch of space is sort of taken up with something. And then, of course, there are these poignant moments in that you go in, there's probably a couple of things that you see in that journey, even though you're probably seeing 1,000 times more than you might have thought you were. And I think this really represents that really nicely. So John Park said, Pumpkin Audrey said, I love that she said that she is a storyteller. Yeah, agreed. And I think that's part of, again, where we start talking about this kind of history, this kind of culture that takes place here. And then John says, super interesting to hear her talk. Lots of ideas and backstory about her thought process. If written, her artist statement would probably be 4 pages long. It could be. It could be. I mean, I think that she has. I think she has this kind of. There's a simplicity about. There's both a simplicity and a complexity about the work, right? And I think that's what I love about it is you can experience this work on a number of levels depending on. Look at how much this work changes when it's put in the bodega setting. Versus maybe just having the single panel. The layers obviously become something entirely different. So this is a great piece. Let's just back out of the space a little bit more so we can see what
I love that sculpture.
I'm gonna let you roll with this one.
There's not much to say. So the one thing that she really doesn't shy away from is this idea of genitalia. That's in her artwork. So, and I think part of it is exposing and part of it's reclaiming. You can't miss it. It's funny because this actually reminds me of you know, like the people of Walmart kind of thing, where you just see
Oh.
somebody, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just kind of like there, and so like her bra's coming off, and she's bending over, and it's all this clunky stuff. I love some of the gestures in her paintings too, because if you look to the right, there's this lady at the ice cream thing, and she's kind of slumped over, and she's got a sore back, and she captures that woman's discomfort so well. And the guy behind the counter is a silhouette. Just really fantastic stuff here.
For those of you who don't know what the People of Walmart is, it was a
How
website.
could you not know?
A lot of people might not know. There was a website though where called the People of Walmart.
Yes.
And this, we're not judging.
No.
But it was like basically a photo survey of some of the more colorful, flavorful characters
that come into
would shop
Walmart.
at Walmart.
Sure.
And I think it's still up. You could go check it out. It
Yeah.
does kind of have that
It's
flair.
entertaining.
Dave says there's an album cover by the City Girls that I bet got their idea from one of these works. And I'm over. You can see me. I'm over here on the other computer, and I'm like scrolling through City Girls, looking for images of that. And yes, I meant that in a good way. Many layers. Yeah, no, exactly. I absolutely figured, John, that you were onto something there. Because I don't think a long artist statement is necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
I feel like what John's really trying to say is that those layers, you know, we could go on and on and on about how, and I think that's the beautiful thing about work like this, right? Is I think that she could write an artist statement that could be to the point, simple and concise and short, but at the same time the work then embodies this kind of deeply layered connection, and it just keeps hitting on all those points, right? Because she really taps into, you know, the storytelling of her past, the storytelling of her heritage. All of those things just sort of like lock in. And do I say it? I want to say it. I want to say it. I want to say it.
I don't know what you want to say.
Well, if I'm thinking about this sort of objectification of the female form, if I'm thinking about the objectification of the black female form, and I'm thinking about other artists that have done this, I feel like she does it better than Kara Walker.
A little bit. Well, that's interesting too, because one of the videos I came across, and it was Tschabalala, and with these two other artists, and she was actually doing, like, teaching to children on how to create portraits and how to use collage with them, and you know, you pick a shape, and to create the portrait, pick something abstract. Think of a shape that defines you. It doesn't have to be recognizable. But then they went into this whole thing about shapes with silhouettes and identity and loss of identity and reclaiming identity and what silhouettes were. And I immediately thought of Kara Walker with that too.
And now that you're saying that, I don't want to say she does it better than Kara Walker, because I don't want to make this necessarily a hierarchical thing.
Right.
But I feel like Kara Walker's works, and I love Kara Walker's works, right? But I feel like in this, there is there's a more diverse approach to how she talks about this, right? Look at the body of work. Look at the diversity of practice. She's got paintings, collage, sculpture, drawing, installation. I mean, it's a huge gamut of representation.
It's multidisciplinary. She
Yeah.
really pulls in everything together to create artwork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
There was a video of Bodega Rum, which is really cool because it takes you through the whole exhibit and you get to experience it as it was up and running. This was from 2019, so it was about 2 years ago. But what a great exhibit.
well, let's see if we can show. Oh, here's some of the other sculptures that.
She's really into this form. So
Well, I mean, okay, let's think
it's
about this.
abstract. These were actually, I believe the title of this one is called Love Seat.
But if she is out to sort of, talk about these kind of exaggerations and these objectifications, what she does here is she very beautifully, or very not beautifully, she very sort of tongue-in-cheek captures that taboo, right? Because it's sort of like, if we're objectifying the female form, well, what are we doing? We're reducing it to some of the most basic sexualized elements, right? And so, bam,
Yep.
She reduces it to this very basic sexualized element, and there it is. It's just like, and so, you know, there it is. I'm talking too much. I feel like I should be letting you talk a little bit more. All right, here we go. Let's keep rolling. Here's another one. I love this. I love how the pattern like completely just takes over the whole piece.
Yes, it really does. She's very focused. She does quite a few sculptures like this too, and she was talking about them in the previous video.
Is this where she's using the plaster gauze?
The plaster gauze
Yeah.
and painting. It's one of those pieces that kind of combines all those elements again. Like, is it a painting? Is it a sculpture? Is it installation? Is it...
And there's this other thing she's doing, even though I'm talking about how she's reducing it to that kind of she's reducing it to the exaggerated form. She's reducing it, and I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm saying that in a way that says, okay, she's getting it down to the essence, right? She's getting it down to the bare minimum. And then what do we have? Well, we've got these other things. We've got this weight. Right? I mean, I bet when you're standing in the room with these things that because of the nearness to the scale of the human form, and I'm guessing it's just up a little bit, you know, like it's just elevated a little bit from that scale. It's going to have this weight, like this presence on the floor, right? So I like that.
Yeah.
Then you take that sort of outrageous kind of patterning that's all over this thing, right? It's this kind of over the top kind of presence. And I think all those things stacked, it's like...
It's funny how they bother me. These sculptures bother, like these in particular bother me. And I know she is pronouncing them and making commentary about that, but maybe that's what's bothering me because they're missing so much. Do you know what I mean? If you look at it in terms of a figure,
That's the point.
It's right, and it's working. Like it bugs me.
It affects you.
It affects me.
Yeah, it affects you. Yeah, and I think that's then it's doing its job.
Yeah.
Right? Because, you know, where are the rest of these
Where's
women?
the rest of it? And it's just so I don't know if that's her intention.
I would say it's absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to necessarily.
But man, they bug me.
I'm not going to necessarily claim to know exactly what the intention is behind these, but it feels like that's part of it. All right, back to some 2D work for a little bit. We're running.
Yeah,
late.
I love the detail on the hands, and some of these hands that we're gonna see, like in this one, the next one I see up in the queue has some more handwork and stuff like that. But I love how she gets like really detailed on some pieces, and then the others are these blocky off geometric forms and patterns and stuff like that. So I love where she puts the detail in, and she backs off and lets it be this big shape.
And isn't that how I think sometimes we find ourselves, if we're talking about that kind of objectification, if we're talking about that kind of where Sarchi was used as an exhibition, right? Which, you know, then it's an object as an exhibition is a thing that is made, it is put in front of you to be looked at, right? And my guess is that there is this kind of feeling maybe that the eyes are on you, right? Because if you're raised in a culture where you've been subjected to that kind of eye on you for whatever reason, then how can you not spend your life feeling like that eye is on you, right? And so in these works, there's this kind of you just nailed it, because I think, you know, you're talking about how there's detail in spots and then it's backed away from in spots, and it's sort of like it's looking but not looking, right? And I feel like that really tells something in the way we're trained to look, or we're asked to look, trained to look, or just maybe just how we look intuitively, how we look at these. And maybe that's what she's trying to tell us. She's trying to show us a reflection of how we look at that body. And that's, talk about being affected by that. Like, as you're saying that, I'm like really feeling something with that. And that's incredible. I mean, and here it is again, right? Ben says, I'm glad I didn't miss this one tonight. I agree, Ben. However, I say this every week to myself. Oh, come on, you guys. You're killing me here.
Stop.
You're killing me. Stop. All right, keep going. So, and here we go again, right? In even a better way, because look at the way this figure sort of exists in space. It's really, really hard to get an idea of what direction it's moving.
Yeah.
There's an awkwardness to the way the pieces are all put together, and it really tells me that there's this comfortable in your own skin kind of thing that doesn't necessarily exist, right? And that might have to do with the I think that Sarchi piece is really telling in how it sort of sets the stage for the narrative. It says this was an exhibition, and that's a horrible thing in order to sort of get yourself ready for every day. And even in that New York Times article, there was not New York Times, I keep saying New York Times, Christie's article, there was a thing in here about she used to enjoy, I'm reading directly from this article right now, Self recalls how much she used to enjoy watching her older sisters getting ready for a night out, and how these observations later galvanized her feminist perspective. She has also talked about being acutely aware of being one of only a handful of black children at her school in the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And so there we go again, right? She's seeing the influences on her growing up, her sisters, getting ready to go out. And what do you do when you get ready to go out? You want to look your best, right? So you're kind of doing it up.
And you accent certain parts of your body.
Absolutely. You want to be sexy, going to the club, right? And so she's seeing this, and then we see these, right? And these are beautiful images, but they're not sexy images, right? And so I don't know. Like, it's funny too, because when we started working on this show and I'm looking at these images, my head might have gone to that place a couple of times, but I never really, now that we're having this conversation, I'm just like, my God, it's really something.
It really is.
Oh wait, some comments. Hold on a minute. Let's see. John says, maybe this is incorrect, but given her age and the amount of work that we're just seeing here, I am assuming that she is very prolific.
She is. Yeah. That's all she does all day long in her studio in Connecticut. She has a studio in New Haven, close to Yale, cheap rents, but this is what she does all day long.
Always fascinated by the idea of people who are very prolific and produce great art and people who are not prolific and produce great art. It's an interesting dichotomy. Yeah, and here's, let me add, can I add a third bullet point to that? And that is the pressure that some artists who are not prolific feel from the artists that are prolific and produce great art, right? And I mean, and there are lots of artists out there that are prolific, just churning out the same thing over and over again, and that's not great art. But yeah, that and Tschabalala is a really fantastic example of this because, her work's in high demand. She's in the studio all day long, and it's just like one piece after another. Right? She's locked into something. I mean,
she's been having significant shows for the past 5 years. Right now, let me see here for a second. So she has a current show. I just want to put this out here right now if anybody wants to take a road trip. But it's Tschabalala Self. It's called By Myself. It's up till September 19th, 2021. This is down in Baltimore, BMA, Baltimore Museum of Art.
And we were talking about, well, we don't need to get into a whole thing about Baltimore here, but that could be a really great road trip to go down and see that show.
There's some fantastic pieces. She's compared to Matisse in here. They do a nice little excerpt on that. So if anybody's looking to go somewhere this summer and they want to see an awesome art show, head down to Baltimore.
Bam.
Yeah.
Much more sort of literal in its representation.
Much more so.
Right? And this is where I'm kind of a little bit wishing we had dates.
I wish we had the dates, yes.
Yeah,
especially given what happened last year and some of the news stories that were coming out. 63
is saying Baltimore Art Museum is stellar. Now, is that in the Fells Point district or is that down in the harbor? Like, whereabouts is that? I'm curious. Let's keep rolling here through some more. Another, much more sort of direct, sort of approach, a little less abstract here. I'm curious what that trajectory was, right? So
Well, this can mean a couple different things, right? Because you think of like police line, do not cross.
oh
And yet
yeah.
you also think of measuring tape and measuring body proportions. So there's like a couple different things coming up here. I love the detail on her feet. Her feet and her hands really get me because I just love that thread and the stitching and drawing with the thread.
I'm really fascinated by her sense of, and I talk about this a lot, but this idea of painterly space, figure-ground relationships, and in this case, weight, gravity, and the ground, right? In a lot of these, some of these pieces are just floating in nothingness. They're in the middle of nowhere. In other ones, they are just like, bam, they're anchored. They feel like they've got a really good sort of sense of grounding, to be very literal in this particular
Yes.
case. And then also maybe in this case, right, there's a real sense of sort of like the way in which pictorial space sort of unfolds here,
Yeah, and
right?
look at this one. I mean, because she's got her printmaking background too, so you see that right there in the background with this layer of painting on top and with this layer of collage on top. Again, the shoes. I love the shoes, but
Yeah, but
yeah,
but then over here, it's completely different. It's sort of got this is almost like a dreamscape, right? This is almost like something else where she's just sort of floating. In this one, she's floating, like there's almost no space, right? So there's, I don't know whether this is to more point directly towards the figure that we're supposed to be looking at, or if this is more to point out, you're just making a conscious decision not to tie this to a space, right? Again, here's another one where it's just sort of like, it's very sort of sitting right up on top, which does give it a much more confrontational kind of presence. This one almost looks right at us. Obviously, the legs are, everything's sort of pointing right at us. And then, and there's another one like that here, which is just like, she's not looking at us, but
No.
you cannot, look at the way the linearity of that pattern in the paper sort of, or the pattern in the fabric works, where everything is sort of like, it's like, the origin of the universe, right there, right? I mean, that's actually the slide I had as the last slide, but I skipped over a bunch. Earlier, John was making a comment about the sort of stop motion animation element of the arms in that one piece when I was talking about shadow. I was really interested in this piece for the shadow element of that black silhouette in the background. I really like that quite a bit because the shadow is not quite the shadow of the woman in the yellow. It almost appears to be a different form, but at the same time creates this kind of dimensionality to what's going on. Creates this, there's a non-space there. I'm going back to my sort of spatiality thing, but then bam, there's that black figure there that sort of either A, creates the illusion of depth in the piece because it's layered, or creates the illusion of flatness in the piece because it's a shadow, right? Oh, wait a minute. Here comes Glenn. Hold on. The great art part notwithstanding, I think the prolific aspect for any artist has more to do with economics than not. You have an ease of economic situation, you can make more art. The great art part is another issue. Absolutely agreed. Yeah. If you can, and we've seen this before, right? If you have the luxury of having the art market recognize you, paying you to be in the space all the time, then yeah, you can do it, right? But then there's the rest of us who, spend our time in our studio in fits and starts to try and cobble together a body of work that might be 12 pieces a year at best. Whereas all right, so let's think about this. If I'm in the studio for 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and in a week's time I get 6 hours in the studio if I'm lucky in a week, that's 24 hours in a month. Yeah, I probably will get a piece or two done in a month. But 24 hours is only half a work week, right? So this other artist might get, twice that in a week, which really constitutes a massive body of work. There's a good conversation starting here because John says that can definitely factor in. But then there are people who struggle longer and go through long dry spells than even than even have means. I'm especially talking about composers here, but it could apply to any form of art. 63, the downside of the teacher artist. Well, 63, what I found is after graduate school, MFAs tend to go in two directions in terms of two primary directions. There's a third that's much less occupied, but there's two primary directions. The first direction is teaching, because now you have the MFA. And so the market for academia is flooded with fresh MFAs coming out of the conveyor belt. The other side of it is the art handling side of it, where you go to work for the gallery and you're either doing, you're handling art, you're hanging shows, you're creating works, you're shipping, you're doing all of that. So in each case, what do you get? Well, in the art handling world, you get exposure to the artists and you get relationships with the galleries, and that can certainly help, especially if you have a studio, right? In the teaching world, you actually get more money and more flexibility, and you're not actually at work as much as the gallery person is, and your colleagues function as your network. In the gallery side, the gallery world functions as your network. On the teaching side, the teachers function as your network. So in both cases, you get a network, and in one case, you get a little more time, and in the other case, you get a little better network. The third offshoot to that is there is this, of course, obsession curators seem to have with hot MFAs coming out of the bigger ticket schools, and so they're coming out and hitting the Whitney Biennial right away, or they're getting gallery representation right away, and they're off to the races. But that's a much smaller population. So, teacher artist, gallery artist, my thought is just don't get your MFA. Just go start making the work. And what you should do is you should move to a city where you can afford a beautiful space that you can be in as much as possible. You don't have to be in Brooklyn paying $6,000 a month. And don't joke or don't laugh when I say $6,000 a month, because go to Williamsburg. See what 2,500 square feet will cost you nowadays. And just get a space. We got social media. We got ways in which to disseminate this work. And now I'm going to stop talking because everybody's just like, wow. From the wreckage.
Yes, from the wreckage. We have just a couple more images real quick. Do you want to show?
Look at how Mom jumps in. She's like, great show tonight. Like, thank you. She's like,
we're going to end on this image
time
right
for Todd to stop
this
talking.
Is one, I feel like this is one of her best known paintings.
I want to
it's
scroll.
Called Sapphire.
I love this piece.
It's gorgeous.
Yes.
I love this. It's a mixed media piece. I love her palette on this. I love the gold. I love the use of geometry.
That little repetitious form up in the head there.
The graphite that you can see, some of the mixed media on top of it. It's just gorgeous. I love it.
Yeah.
Look at even the design with the jewelry on the hands.
Really, really delicious palette too. I love the way the pinks, blues, orange blues, blues and yellows, the way all these layers, there's a little bit of translucency in that sort of right up through the center part of the torso of the body here, the way this sort of blue kind of runs. It's kind of like a lacy sort of thing. There's a little bit of a hint towards the printmaking aspects of this. This is a exquisite piece. I also do appreciate, look at the way that thigh curves down, and just underneath the stitching there's almost like the staining of an ink, that almost as if there is a drop shadow there, or the hint.
Lacy. It looks lacy and sexy, like lingerie or something.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I think her work is really, really
gorgeous.
I cannot
Just
wait to
gorgeous.
see where this goes over the next couple of years.
Yeah.
I'd love to get down to Baltimore to see that show. Do we have any more that I missed?
I think that's
a really good one to end on, right?
Yeah.
So Tschabalala Self is somebody to really, really keep your eye on.
She's got a fantastic Instagram too. She uses a lot of symbolism in her Instagram. If you look her up, the S's are replaced by dollar signs. So, yeah.
So if you can, what is her Instagram? Do we know what that is, so everybody can go and look for her? She's not hard to find. I mean, as soon as you type in TSCHA, it's like, boom, everything gets filled in. But she is all one word, Tschabalala Self.
Yeah.
And definitely go and check her out.
Yeah, beautiful.
So are we gonna? We tried rolling credits last time and it just didn't work.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have to do that.
We don't have to do that.
Anyway, I got a surprise for you. Well, not a surprise, but I've got news. And the news is this. Next week, episode 50. 50. We've got a live artist on the show. You do not want to miss this, and you want to tell your friends about it, because we're going to be talking process. We're going to be talking about craftsmanship. We're going to be talking about teaching. There's so many elements to this. Multidisciplinary practice.
The artist we have is a visual artist, but he also creates documentaries on other artists, and he's also a
luthier, meaning he makes his own stringed instruments, in this case Spanish guitars.
He's amazing. We're so excited to have him.
He's got a detail and craft that is just unmatched, and it goes beyond that, right? This is not just about somebody who happens to make guitars. He's really special.
Yeah.
So anyway, we loved having all of you here tonight, and we really appreciate all the vibrancy in the chat. You guys are so good at filling this conversation out. We love that.
Yes.
And so I would like to make this toast to.
A tiny.
Do you need more?
I have a tiny.
Hold on.
Oh, pour more of the crisis.
6-point crisis.
6-point crisis.
People, we will see you on Tuesday. Always be careful not to say see you next Tuesday.
See you next
63
Tuesday.
is like easy there. Easy there. All right, everyone. Have a great week. We will see you next week for another awesome show.
Number 50.
Thanks for watching us. We'll talk to you soon. Cheers.
Cheers.